And we have just learned the United States has issued new sanctions on Iran. According to the U.S. Treasury Department website, 13 people and a dozen companies are being punished over a recent ballistic missile test and other activities. We want to welcome Ali Noorani. He's the executive director at the National Immigration Forum and the author of the book, There Goes the Neighborhood, due in bookstores. Ali, thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I know I've just handed you copies of these as we see, but as we parse them, what do you make of what you're seeing?
Well, clearly, I mean, if there's one thing that can be said about the Trump administration the first 2 weeks is that it's taking a very aggressive posture to a range of issues. And I think that this set of sanctions really continues that trend of really addressing the nation's security needs, and it remains to be seen how this will all play out.
Now, the threats that had been made, both from the National Security Advisor and the President himself, had been vague. Iran had been put on notice. They were said to be playing with fire by the President on Twitter. Republican lawmakers have lauded this, in part saying that Iran essentially has no idea really what's being planned. It invokes something of the Nixon madman theory. If they don't know who they're dealing with, they don't know how to deal with him. What do you make of that?
Well, we can operate in theories, or we can operate in actual governing policies. And this set of sanctions is an important step, perhaps. And I think what ultimately what the president should be doing is protecting the nation's interests and the nation's security. But we also need policies and programs implemented in a sound and effective way. You look back at this last weekend and this travel ban and the Muslim ban and these changes to the refugee programs, they're rolled out, implemented in such a haphazard fashion that we think that in the long term it actually undermines our interests.
Well, interestingly, CBS News has some polling out regarding the ban, and 51% disapprove, 45% say they do approve. Along partisan lines, it breaks far sharper. The numbers, as you can see here, are in the mid-80s, depending on party. Are you surprised by the relatively slim overall margin here?
I'm not surprised, actually. And the American people are scared. They're worried. And we have to acknowledge and try to understand that fear. But we also have to address that fear in a pragmatic and a practical way. And that means, number one, no more fear-mongering. When we talk to law enforcement across the country, in this book that I wrote, actually, we interviewed a number of law enforcement across the country. We actually learned that law enforcement on the ground, they want to have the trust of the immigrant community that they serve and protect. And when you have the federal government requiring law enforcement to take on immigration responsibilities, that trust is eroded, and ultimately everybody's safety is undermined.
Okay, I mean, you put it on the table here.
Yep.
Do you see the ban as fear-mongering?
I see the ban as bad policy. Ultimately, what we want is a nation that is inclusive, but more than that, a nation that has strong relationships with our allies overseas and the people who are living with our communities. The best way to find the needles who are here to do us harm is to have the trust of the folks who live in those communities, because nobody wants to live next door to a terrorist, whether they're, regardless of what religion or what country they're from.
These were countries that we have been told time and again by Trump administration officials were originally identified by the Obama administration, almost as though the previous administration is being used as something of a shield here for the ban. But to go back and include the 9/11 attacks, this ban, had it been in place from 2001 to today, would not have prevented any of the major terrorist attacks on American soil.
What is worrying us most about what the Trump administration is doing is that they are not letting the experts do their job. This order was clearly written by a handful of people in the White House, in the Oval Office, again, rolled out in a very haphazard way, and I'm not sure if it actually addressed any actual security threats.
I have 30 seconds. The wall being built, it's said by the Homeland Security Secretary, it'll happen within 2 years. Is that going to move the needle as it regards feelings regarding immigration?
People want a wall. It's very clear. But actually, if you want to secure the border, invest in ports of entry. That is where we see the majority of drugs, guns, and money being smuggled, and that's where our trade and tourism with Mexico and even Canada is so dependent.
Ali Noorani, we very much appreciate the time and the insight. And again, the book,
There Goes the Neighborhood.
There Goes the Neighborhood, in bookstores soon. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ali.